Bridle joints. This here is a bridle joint. It goes together like this. It's a little bit like a mortise and tenon. Bridle joints are often used in frame construction, such as making doors and tables, things like that. In fact, here's some examples. Here, 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 here. Now, with bridle joints, sometimes they can be in the middle like this. That's a T bridle joint. Or sometimes they can be on the end like that, a corner bridle joint. What's important to know is that in a frame, which has bridle joints, the upright, the vertical bit, is called the stile. Okay, stile, S-T-I-L-E. The horizontal bit is called the rail. Typically in, say, if it was a rectangle like this, and it went like that, like that, like that, like that, it would go stile, rail. Sometimes that one's called the top rail, and sometimes that one's called the bottom rail. But the ones on the side are called stiles. Here are some of the tools you need in order to be able to cut a bridle joint. A T bridle joint at that. Tenon saw, bevel edge chisel, tri-square, coping saw, mortise chisel, mallet, hand router, G-clamp, marking out knife, steel rule, pencil, sharp, bench hook, and a mortise gauge. These are the two pieces of wood which will be your components for making the T bridle. It doesn't matter if they're not the same size, mine are, but what's important is that the ends are square. So if the ends aren't square, make sure you get your tri-square, line it off, and then go to the belt sander and give it a little fizz to make sure it's nice and square. First things first, we'll mark out both components. In the interest of everything lining up nicely, what I've done is I've just measured and put a little mark on the center point of this component and the center point of this component, and I'm just going to marry up those lines like that, making sure that they are flush to the end. Now I'm kind of in the middle, really. Going to get the tri-square, put that up against there, making sure that this wood is vertical like that. Again, just feeling that in there, making sure that handle is right up against that bit there. Take it off and then mark like that, and this side here. Then what you can do, if you're very careful, you can pick this up, you can rotate round like that, and then do that. And then just double check that that line is actually square and these lines are square. It's good. And then just go through the process of transferring those lines all the way around that component and all the way around that component there. What I should have said is that in the interest of being spot on when we actually finish it, I'm going to have this component go a little bit past, like that. Hold on. There you go, like that. Like 2 millimeters past. And the reason why I do that is because when you've finished cutting this component and you slot them together, yes, this will overshoot a little bit, but then you can just go to the belt sander, give it a little fizz, and then that will turn out to be nice and flush like that. So I know I've just got you to get to mark it out like that, but now you've done that, take it down 2 millimeters, tri-square that all the way around. Like that. I mean, if you want to, you can rub out that line there. In fact, I might do that. And if you're really unsure about which line to go to because your rubbing out wasn't that good or your marks are too dark or whatever, sometimes I just do this. An arrow pointing to the line that I want to cut to. Right, now we need to mark out what part of the sides we're going to cut. Now in this side here, we're going to take off these two sides, and in this one here, we're just going to take out the middle. So we need to divide the wood by 3. I can see the width of this wood is exactly 18 millimeters, so divided by 3, and that's 6 millimeters. So now we've just got to transfer that measurement to the mortise gauge. So between these two pins, it needs to be 6 millimeters. So you can use the ruler in order to get 6 millimeters, and then move this, which is called the adjustable spur. These things are called spurs. Now it just so happens that when I move this part of the adjustable spur all the way up and it's touching the fixed spur, it is actually 6mm. But if you didn't want to do it like that, the mortise chisels we have here are 6mm. So you can actually put the mortise chisel up to there and yep, pin to pin or spur to spur, that is 6mm. Now we just need to set the distance between the stock and the adjustable spur. Now because we divided 18 by 3, then that's 6, so the bit between there and here has to be 6 as well. So just take that up, get 6 best you can, lock off the stock, and then double check. Always do the double check. Right, now we're good to use. But in order to do another check just before you actually go down and mark the wood, what I would do is here, just out of sight a little bit, just put 2 tiny marks there, and then just with your ruler, double check that your measurements on the mortise gauge are exactly the ones you want them to be. 6mm and 6mm. That's good to go. So then just mark off. Like that. Take a pencil down those lines you've just made with a mortise gauge. Right, so for the next part, we are going to create a V-notch. Using a marking knife, go down this line here, and then you'll just pair or use the chisel with your hand, which is called pairing, and you'll just make a little notch in here. Now the reason why you would make a V-notch is for 2 reasons really. It's to help guide the saw when you're making those cuts down, and it's also to help protect the shoulder, which is this bit here. So using your tri-square and a marking out knife, or as we have here, Stanley knife, make a couple of lines going down there like that. Do the same the other side. When that's clamped down, you can then take your chisel and up against your scrap piece of wood here, make sure it's firmly on there, and just use the mallet just to make a little indentation in the wood. You don't have to go down too far. Always making sure that you're pressing up against this reference piece of wood. So now do the other side. And then flip it over. And the other side. Now while the wood is still secured to the bench, you're just going to use your chisel that way round in order to just go in at an angle. Now I've got a 12mm chisel here. You can use a bigger one if you want. You'll probably get the job done a little bit faster. This is the one I've got to hand, so I'm going to use this. Now just going to make tiny little incisions like that. There you go. Going down just until I stop at that line. Now this is what you call making a V-notch. Yeah, you can see that V-notch there. Just my camera isn't great. That V is going to help us guide the saw and making sure that these shoulders are kept nice and clean. You obviously now have to do the same for that side, and that side. Bang on. Come on, get in focus. For the next part, we're going to use a tenon saw in order to cut down this line here, and then the same on the other side. But when we cut, we're not going to just cut straight down. We're going to cut at a slight angle going up like that. Now what that is going to do is going to form what you call an apex. It's a bit like a tent. This is a picture of an apex here. The reason why we use apexes when we're removing wood is because it can be easier to remove, it protects the opposite edge, it prevents splitting of the wood, and it prevents chiseling below the joint depth. Just be careful not to go below that line. Now I'm not convinced that my marking lines with the mortise gauge went in deep enough, so I'm just going to use the marking out knife just to go down a little bit further because I don't want my edges to chip off. Right, so now we're going to chisel up. Now it's time to use the chisel to chisel up and make that apex or tent if you like. You can use a 12mm or you can use something a bit bigger if you like. I might use a 24 just because it's double the size and it will get the job done a lot quicker. Right, as you can hopefully see, I've just split the wood. So I put the chisel in there, went to chisel up, and I split the wood. So what I didn't do there, and what I should have done, my initial tenon saw should have gone down to that line, which I know you can't see, but it was just there. I didn't go down to that line, and I was a bit high. So when I put the chisel in, it went below that saw mark, and therefore it split the wood. Time to do another bit. Right, I've just cut another piece, and I've made sure that I've sawn down to the line there, and there, and there, all nicely. Now there you can roughly see that this wood kind of goes up in the middle like that. Now all you have to do is to chisel roughly flat, and then we're going to finish off with a hand router. Right, now for hand router. So when using the hand router, you can keep the component in the vise. I don't see a problem with that. I know sometimes in the past we have used a scrap bit of wood in order to G-cramp it onto the bench. As long as it's sticking up enough from the surface of the bench, then I'm sure that'll be okay. Right, so with the hand router, you're just looking to take off small bits at a time. Too many times I've seen people take off chunks, and by doing that, you risk splitting the wood. Remember, we only need to go down 6mm in this case, so it's just little bits at a time. I would go to the highest point where the blade touches the wood and start from there. Now, when using the hand router, I see too many people do this. Both hands should not be moving in this direction. You should really just be using one of the hands to pivot like that. So really only one hand should be doing the rotation. The other should just be just for guidance, and it just makes sure that this is on this piece of wood, the reference point that's called. And when you're happy, go down a little bit more. I would only do this half here first, because if you go over here and you strike that side, you do risk splitting the other side. You want to protect that edge. So just go from this area here first, turn it 180, and then go the other side. I can use my ruler in order to check that I've gone down 6mm, and I can also do a check that I can still see a small portion of this line here, the line that I made with my pencil. Now, if I can still see the line, then that means that I know I haven't gone down too far. That's this slight line here. And you might just want to pare the chisel down the side just to make sure you're getting all these bits of fluff off. Okay, that looks okay. It's not too bad. Time to do the other component. So the shaded part of this component is the bit that we need to remove. I'm going to make 2 cuts here with the tenon saw. I'm going to cut there and there, but I'm not going to cut on the line. Oh no, I'm going to cut inside the waist, but just inside the waist. Remember, when cutting a component such as this, always cut on the 45-degree angle. So you'll cut down there, and then you'll turn it that way, or flip it around and do the other angle. Right guys, you've got to be incredibly careful not to cut inside the work. Remember, inside the waist. Blow off the fluff as you go so you can see the line. Just switch it around like that. Inside the waist, not inside the work. Right, so as you can imagine, inside it looks a bit like that right now. So you just have to make a final cut down to the shoulder line here. Now, in order to take that middle bit out, you could whack it with a mortise chisel. Potentially it could go a little bit wrong. So what I do, I just get a coping saw in there, as much as I can, down to near the shoulder line. There you go. So after you've done that, you need to set up the component with a bit of spare wood and a G-cramp onto the bench in order to take out the middle bit here, just up to the shoulder line. You've got to be really careful that you don't bruise that shoulder line or you go past it. So the setup of this, the spare wood onto the component, is so important that you get it right. And don't take off big chunks at a time. Start there or wherever, the furthest back you can, and just go back in stages. You don't have to go all the way down and all the way through, because we will flip it over and go from the other side as well. You should then be able to get the mortise chisel and making sure that it's as horizontal as possible, take the rest of the remaining wood out. Turn it around if you need to. Get those pieces of wood out any way you can. As you can see, I've got a little way to go. In order to remove the pieces of wood on the inside of these lines here, I need to pair with the chisel, and that's just using the chisel by hand. So I've got a little bit more to take down. I've put the component in the vise like this. I'm going to take the chisel and then just on that line, bashing it down with the ball of my hand. Just take it very easy, establishing that nice crisp line made when you marked out with the marking gauge and the pencil. Again, this method is called pairing. If you want, you can put the component upright in the vise and then pair down like this. Just make sure that those lines are really, really crisp though. Now this may take some time to do this correctly. You're only taking tiny bits off at a time. Now when you think you have taken down enough, you need to try to see if it fits. You should be able to just push it in by hand. Now, if I run my finger across the top like that, I can feel that this is protruding quite a lot. So it tells me that I probably need to take a little bit more down. Now I can see there's gaps there. So there's probably some wood in the middle of this component here that I just need to shave off just a little bit more. Or of course there could be too much wood sticking up here, in which case I'd need to take this down. I'm going to check now. Yeah, my ruler says 5.5 millimeters, so I need to go down a little bit more using the hand router. Okay, that goes in all right. There's a slight gap there, not too bad, and it's feeling nice and flush there. The ends, okay, that's okay. Now it's time just to clean that up a little bit with the belt sander. Now at this stage, before you belt sand that is, you probably want to glue and cramp it before you actually do this. This should be the final stage that you do. Now just because this is a demonstration and I want to be able to take these off and on again, I'm not going to glue it now, but what I am going to do, I'm just going to make sure that the final assembly is nice and square, then I'll give it a fizz. Remember your Gucci's.